You know all these people, so there's no sense in going along. Bruce Dold, editorial editor of the Chicago Tribune. Kristen McQueary, formerly the pride and joy of the South Suburban newspaper, now on the editorial board of the Chicago Tribune. And our John Kass, the pride and joy of John Kass. So,
it's always great to be loved.
There's a lot of love in the room. So we're going to go showing tremendous organization right down the line. 6 or 7 minutes on the topic. Bruce, you're up first.
All right. So I came across a wild story about the mayor's race the other day with Lake Michigan waves crashing on the shore and closing Lakeshore Drive and flooding the buildings and the mayor getting blamed and the former mayors barnstorming around the city blaming the current mayor for it, and Jesse Jackson's throwing his weight around, and crowds are shouting out all of the candidates for mayor up and down the city, and it was 1987. So, back to it. It was a Kass and Dold double byline on the piece.
What time was that?
What time? You were first, I think. But it was Jane Byrne running against Harold Washington, with Eddie Verdoliak waiting in the wings to take on the pluck off the winner. It just Paul, it just the glory day. Reminder. So we don't get races like that anymore. I saw Bill Ruthart had a really good story in Sunday's Tribune about the race, and he quoted Rod Sawyer saying Rahm Emanuel is running against himself, which is really true. You look at the latest Tribune poll shows every opponent running against Rahm is over 50% in either I don't know or I don't care. People haven't figured out who they are, and they don't really have an impression of him yet. Rahm, on the other hand, is still struggling with all the money that he's got and the campaign that he's run in 4 years and that incessant press operation, and he's still at 45%. I think because he's running against himself, and Rahm Emanuel may force Rahm Emanuel into a runoff. We felt like when we endorsed Rahm Emanuel, it felt like we had to deal with this in the piece, that if you are of the mind that he has not connected with people, that he has been focused on moneyed interests, that he has been gallivanting around the country, well, you're not alone. We heard that a lot, and so we were interviewing candidates for alderman this time. And you could see it in the Tribune polls. The last poll, not this one, the last one that we did, asked, is Rahm in touch with the people? 54% said no. Does Rahm give enough attention to your neighborhood? 60% said no. So that's really what he's running against. And I have in my mind that he has a lot of accomplishments in the city. I think a longer school day, the kids are in school for longer hours. That's a very good thing. He'll be the first one to tell you before I'll tell you that. But that really was an important thing. You look at how the CTA is operating under Forrest Claypool. I think it's a much better operation than it was. He started to turn around the city finances, which Rich Daley really left in a mess. I think what he's done on the schools, what he's done with transportation, what he has started to do with city finances, they really are making a substantial impact. And we have more jobs than we had before. And yet he's still only at 45% in the Tribune poll. When we reflected that in the endorsement, we had to deal with that failure to connect. And we also had to deal with the intense secretiveness of the administration. Our reporters see it all the time. And the stonewalling on information, basic information that you need. If the administration had its way, you still wouldn't know that you were getting nabbed by yellow lights that lasted for 2.9 seconds. They didn't want you to know that. It's a huge issue in this campaign, and we talked to the aldermanic candidates. It's a big issue with the people around the city. So he's got a lot of competition. And then you look at the competition, as I mentioned, nobody's figured out who they are. Bob Fioretti says he wants to put 500 more officers on the street. Chuy Garcia says he wants to put 1,000 officers on the street. Well, who told him that taking the Rahm Emanuel 2011 playbook was the way that you beat Rahm Emanuel? I think John, we've known Chewy Garcia for a long time, going back to council wars. I think Chewy's fatal flaw is that he's just too nice a guy to be mayor of Chicago. You saw that. I was listening to him on WVN this morning, and they were trying to press him on how would you fix the schools. They got a massive financial problem going there. How are you going to fix the schools? He would hold hands, and he would listen, and he would hold hands, and he would listen. And he never got around to saying what he would do to stop them from going bankrupt. I like Willie Wilson. I really like the story when we had all the candidates come to an endorsement debate. Willie Wilson was the first one to show up, and he wouldn't come into the room. He said there were too many Republicans in there. Now, he's the guy who backed Bruce Rauner. He did. He waited for Chewy Garcia to come before he'd come into the room. So I'll just say, I think it's unlikely there will be a runoff. I would guess that when Barack Obama comes in this week, he will have a significant impact, and the last week of the campaign will probably be beneficial for the mayor. And I would guess he'd avoid a runoff. I saw Carol Marin wrote a piece saying she'd love to see a runoff, and I think really, yeah, I'd like to see a runoff just to see. If we do have a runoff, I want you to remember, thank the Republican Party, because that was passed by the legislature in 1995. The vote in the House was 59 Republicans voted for it, 1 Democrat. Lauren Beth Gash was the only Democrat who voted for that because the Republicans were so sick of losing elections. Paul Green, what percentage of the vote did Don Hyder get in 1987? 4.3. Right. They had to do something about it. So we'll see. Kristen, I think we'll talk about some of the city council races and the mayor's races. We really had an interesting time. I always love every 4 years of talking to those candidates for all of them, and you just learn a lot about what's going on in the city. Thanks.
Round of applause for Bruce.
So last week we published our endorsements for the Chicago City Council. We basically spent the entire month of January interviewing more than 150 candidates. Bruce compares the process to Thanksgiving dinner. It takes hours and hours of preparation, and then it's all over in 15 minutes. Unless you're the Sun-Times, in which case it's over as soon as a newspaper owner tells you whom to endorse. We learn a lot about the city. Come on. They're going to get their chance, right? So this is Tribune's Day. We learn a lot about the city through the process of interviewing candidates, including a neighborhood on the northwest side where residents have to pool their own money to hire snowplow drivers because they get frustrated waiting for the city. We told them they just need to move to Ed Burke's ward. But we also learn about the city and a little bit about them personally. One of our surveys questions that we hand out to all the candidates asks them to tell us something that would surprise us about them. So I thought I would share a couple of those. They're kind of funny. Deb Mell revealed in hers that she has a lion tattoo. I think it's on her arm, but we didn't press her for specifics. There's somebody in the 36th ward who has a great barbecue recipe, and if he wins, I'm going to make sure that we get that published. Chooks Onisia in the 18th ward admitted that he was a South Side Cubs fan, which almost lost him my vote for the endorsement, but I gave him a pass. Anthony Beal revealed that he is an excellent bowler. And then Mary O'Connor talked about in the 41st ward how she's never had a cup of coffee, which I find very hard to believe, but that's what they told us. So we're 1 week out from Election Day. There are 43 contested ward races, and we're supposed to be doing predictions, so I will give you my predictions, and if I get them right, I will share my NCAA bracket at the appropriate time. But I'm guessing there are going to be 15 aldermanic runoffs, which is a slight uptick over 4 years ago because there's a new map and more open seats. And the wards are, in case you want to call your bookies, 2, 7, 9, 15, 16, 18, 21, 24, 29, 31, 33, 36, 38, 43, and 45. And I'm guessing turnout will be probably right around 30%, which is pretty low, but given the weather and voter apathy, I would peg it to be right around that number. As I mentioned, we learned a lot about the city through the endorsements. We had candidates come in on the northwest side complaining about tree trimming and too much development, O'Hare noise. Then we have candidates coming in from the south side who talk about a different kind of noise in their neighborhood, and that's gunfire. They talk about how their children are unable to play outside. And we had incumbent aldermen talking about how they use their menu money sometimes for funerals of children who are killed in, the crossfire of gang disputes. So it's no myth that Chicago is a tale of two cities. It is a fact, and that is bearing out in these aldermanic races. And it's essentially the backdrop of the mayoral race, whether or not you think the current leadership is representing the whole city or just certain parts of the city. Another quick realization during the endorsement process was, for me, coming to terms with the unjust and the immoral, yes, I'm using the word immoral, ward maps. I don't know how you can expect communities like Englewood or Back of the Yards to get decent representation on city council when you have carved them up during the remap process because nobody really wants them. And 6 or 7 aldermen representing tiny pieces of Englewood does not make that community stronger, it weakens it. So the process of remapping, while we've talked about it a lot at the state level, it was a realization to me at the city level we need to continue pressing to get that process out of the hands of elected officials. So the good news is in going through this process, it is really a privilege to meet all the candidates who are running. Nobody has bigger heart than activist Chicago residents who want to challenge the status quo and put their names out there to run for office. They were firefighters, teachers, barbers, retired city workers. It's not easy to run for office, to knock on doors and gather signatures from largely apathetic voters. And it's a fight to even appear on the ballot. Even if you do everything right, you can still face a costly ballot challenge designed to drain you. Where are you, Bert Odelson? I am looking at you. Yes. And you put yourself out there for opposition and criticism, you really make yourself vulnerable. So in closing, truly a heartfelt and sincere thank you to all of the candidates running. It takes courage to do it. It's a fact that's never lost on me, and I hope it's not lost on you either. And then,
Okay. I have one statement about Ram. And all of you who are working, that are going to run back and tell Mayor Sachs what I said, you should know that it's being streamed, so you don't really have to carry the note. All right. The motto here, I think, the best motto for the city, thank God I don't have to make an endorsement. Those are the important, that's an important job. I don't have to do it. But my motto is, make Ram spend it all. Have a runoff. Have a runoff, encourage a runoff, have the people come out and vote, have more talk about what's going to happen after the election, more talk about the property tax that you're going to get nailed with, more talk about the $900 million in borrowing that these two have written about, and the $600 million that's due next. When does it due?
550.
Right, 550. Sorry, $50 million off, and all that stuff that we're not talking about. Meanwhile, Ram is busy with the rings, right, Alderman? He's given the rings to. When does that happen? Then it's soon, right? He's going to give rings to the kids at Jackie Robinson West. I'd say he's going to give rings to their parents, jewelry, tie clips, whatever. He'll just keep giving it and hugging them and loving them up. And it's unfortunate for some who lived out of the district that the kids, that they didn't have wives who could have a wedding dress in the crawl space of their home, but then, they're too young to be married, right? They're only 12. I'm sorry. Did I say something? You guys, don't worry, he's not going to get really that mad. Rahm Emanuel deserves to have a runoff because we need to have a city discussing the problems that it's facing. And these two try, and the editorial boards try. I don't think I do as good enough job as I should be doing on that score, but I'll try. thing about Ram is that he's really not likable. And he just should admit it. I think he has admitted it. He's had to make some tough decisions, and he doesn't like to be questioned about those tough decisions. So he comes off very vulnerable, very defensive, almost kind of like a Mayor Antoinette thing, and I don't think he really wants to be. He just gets impatient with criticism. And that's okay, but I think we need a runoff. I don't think we can, if we don't have a runoff, there are people who want us to sort of just end the election right now. Let it be done with. Let's move on. Let's not talk about Ram and the insider stuff that the Chicago Tribune's investigative reporters have written about. The 100 or so top donors who've been able to, I guess, give him half of his money, and then he takes care of them in one way or another. See, the problem that's facing the city and the state, I think, is not just about the money that we spend, but that all these deals that happen for all these decades, decade after decade after decade, many of them have been done in secret, and the power has taken care of, people have taken care of their power relationship at the expense of the citizens. And you can't help it. Really, you can't help it, which is why newspapers have ethics policies, and I think politicians have ethics policies, although sometimes I wonder when Ram is being very quiet and won't explain what he's doing, what he's really talking about when he talks about ethics. We need dissent in the city. Look what happened to this city for 20 years of not having it, when the last guy spent us into oblivion. And what are they doing? Becky Carroll, I like Becky, she's a friend. I've seen Becky and Scott Wagspack, Alderman Wagspack, and myself were sitting in basically the same section at the fire games. And of course, there are no fire games to be at now, but soon there will be. And I understand what they're doing with Chicago Forward. I understand the politics of it. I just think that there should be dissent. And having a politic that doesn't like dissent or tries to crush it, and that's what they're doing, is wrong. It's wrong for everybody. It's wrong for the families and the children and everybody who lives here and everybody who lives around it. So anyway, that's my piece. I want them to spend it all. Ram, I know you have the money. Please spend it all. It'll be a great campaign to have another one after this one. Thank you.
Okay. If you have a question, raise your hand. Where are our, go ahead. She'll pick them up. I have some questions. Just raise your hand. I have one that's anonymous, and anonymous questions, the City Club rules. You got to sign your name. You could sandbag, but you got to have enough guts to sign your name. I mean, enough of that. And by the way, Mr. Dold, remember the guy who saved the day in 1987 on the Outer Drive?
No.
John Halpin. Got to help these guys out. He was the head of Streets and Sand, and he's the guy that found a way to unplug the.
Yeah, no, I think you're conflating the river.
No, 87 on.
In Lake Michigan.
No,
so I was talking about, in 87, it was Lake Michigan.
No, it was the Outer Drive. You know, they try. Thank you, Alderman.
We rescind that endorsement.
Something the Sun-Times may or may not do, all depends on the ownership, right? Okay, by the way, that'll go down as one of the great lines in the history of the City Club. All right, here we go. Perfect. This is for you, Kristen. From Bill, is that Eager? Okay, sir. Which sitting alderman do you think will lose their seats?
Oh, gosh.
Notice
Which
I'm starting
incumbents?
off with a softball. Go right to it.
I'm gonna have to look through my cheat sheet.
Well, you look that up because that's a toughie. By the way, Alderman Riley, you're running unopposed? Yes, sir. Democracy works best. Okay.
I think Kristen will have a few names, but I think probably two of the most vulnerable. One is Natasha Holmes, who was Rahm Emanuel's first appointment to the council. She seems like she's probably toast. The other is Deb Mell, who was his second appointment to the council, who also seems to be in some trouble in her ward. The mayor's appointments aren't exactly clean in the deck.
I would say Leslie Hairston is in some trouble, too. South Shore residents are kind of fed up with their representation. I would even say, well, I would say maybe Lona Lane in the 18th, because she barely, well, I think she's probably going to be headed for a runoff. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Graham Grady, Taft Law. How much of an impact will the youth vote and social media have on the mayoral race? Will it compare to Obama's 2008 election? There's a softball. Jump on it, whoever wants it.
When you think about social media, you're looking at the three.
I guess
We're
if they-
really into that.
Yeah, let's
State House.
State House chick can answer this.
State House
Restate
chick.
the question, please.
Yes, make sure your answer is in the form of a question, though. How much of an impact will the youth vote and the social media have on the mayoral race? And then Graham, being a clever fella, will you compare it to Obama's election in 2008?
I don't think there's nearly the enthusiasm for a mayor's race as there is for Obama in '08. We had a bunch of students come in through the editorial board recently, and some of them were just getting to the age where they're old enough to vote. They barely know who the candidates are. So if any of the mayoral candidates are counting on the youth vote to push them over the line, I think that'd probably be a big mistake.
Okay, here's some from Gerhard Cardenas from ARP. Good question. This is another traditional City Club question. As a Tribune reader, you know he's setting you up, right? As a Tribune reader, I am confused. You endorse Emanuel, where your news team is also investigating him. And today you run a story on him potentially receiving 50% of the vote, which may discourage voters. How is this not a contradiction?
Because the newsroom doesn't get a vote, and I don't get a say on what the newsroom does. We really do keep distinct operations going. So an endorsement for mayor is not being influenced by news coverage. Our decision is influenced by news coverage. We read those stories too. That's why that piece needed to reflect what it reflected. That was not a glowing endorsement in many ways, and we did talk about the transparency issues, which our reporters have run into, and we did talk about that connectedness issue. So I would say the endorsement was it's colored by all the great reporting that has been done, but it's an independent decision.
John, you want to?
No, I think that's well spoken. I mean, the editor, he's here, and the publisher have never asked me or told me, and my other editors and colleagues here have never come and say, John, write this or don't write this. Never, ever, ever. And we don't tell Bruce what, that's a newspaper, that's a position of the newspaper. And the news side goes out and gets their news. That's how it should be.
This is from Father Ryan. Father Ryan, we have a three-part question here. If it's okay if I just take... Holy Spirit. Don't flip religions that quick. Here we go. To the panel, has there been any of the candidates who have discussed or spoken about the issues of either prejudice, poverty, or the one that I wish you would take, because going along with John Kass, the number one issue facing the city of Chicago is the pension crisis. Why isn't the budget and the pension crisis been covered more than it has been? Because that's the number one issue.
So that's certainly our number one issue at the editorial board, probably. And that's the kind of the dichotomy of these races is we tried to endorse candidates who were, people care about potholes and garbage cans, really. But then we tried to pick people who were also realistic about the condition the city is in, and you're not going to get better rat control and potholes if we don't do something to fix the finances. I will say this, it was rather astonishing the number of longtime incumbents who came in to meet with us, and when asked, how could you let the city's finances go to the brink so dramatically? Why isn't there more pushback? Why did you approve $900 million in borrowing just a year ago after our fabulous debt series with very little debate? I got a lot of blank stares, and actually a few, that's a good question, I don't know. So I think has been a longstanding relationship between the council and the administration where they just kind of believe what the administration tells them about bonds and refinancing, and there is not a lot of pushback on those issues. I hope there will be going forward.
I think there are some who push back, and again, I want to credit my colleagues on the editorial board that their work on this, and it's just been outstanding. But I think there are some people who push back in government. Scott Wagsback, some of the independents who've asked and demanded for a real inspector general. I don't know why the city council cannot have a budget office the way legislative bodies should have a budget office. I just think that there's things that have to be done that aren't sexy, but I think that are important for the long-term viability of the city.
Yeah, it really wasn't for lack of trying. I say Kristen and Marie Dillon, who conducted the bulk of our interviews with, more than 150 candidates, I think asked again and again about those basic financial questions. And I think any candidate who talks to us about what are you going to do for the neighborhoods, well, it starts with having a city that's not bankrupt. There's nothing you can do for the neighborhoods if your city's underpinnings are completely thrown out the window, and you're close on the city of Chicago on that. So I think we did put the question to them. I think if you also, I thought it was kind of interesting. So we haven't found a lot of common cause with the Chicago Teachers Union on the editorial board, but we endorsed, I believe, 10 candidates that the Chicago Teachers Union endorsed, because what we were looking for was people who would go to the city council and raise a ruckus, not be sheep, who will make some noise there, whether we agree with them on everything or not. I think we agreed with more CTU candidates than we did sometimes the candidates. So I think that is pretty essential. We may not agree with what their answers are, but boy, we got to get some kind of a debate going.
Well, okay. By the way, one of the questions you could ask the mayoral candidates: who's the best person to run a $7.3 billion budget? And
well, Paul, that is a good question. And I say, and that was one of the frustrations with everybody running against Rahm Emanuel. They all did talk about the neighborhoods. We never heard a solid answer for them on how they were going to solve the financial issues that the city faces.
I'm available if you want me to sit on those boards. I'd be very happy to ask those questions. All right, Sharon Alter, for Bruce Dold specifically. Emanuel and Ronner have been longtime friends. Well, we'll say friends. If Emanuel wins on February 24th, what will the relationship between the governor and the mayor be in the next several years?
I think we'll know a lot about that in about 24 hours when the governor puts his budget out and see how much he takes away from municipal government as part of the pain that the city faces. There's no question that they're tight. I think the mayor's pretty tight with the Senate president. Probably it's more of a business relationship with the Speaker of the House. So the mayor could be a conduit to those legislators. Bruce Ronner looks like he wants to go scorched earth with things, and so Rahm Emanuel may find it more and more difficult to show some sympathy with his friend there. But there's no question that there are some good personal relationships they can use over the next few years.
Okay, from Charlie Gardner, Roosevelt University trustee, which has nothing to do with the fact that I'm reading his question. Why didn't you endorse ABR? Anybody but Rahm.
All right. I think we're always open to endorsing anybody. You know, a lot depends on how they do in the room. And if you looked through, as Bruce said, if you looked through the platforms of his opponents, they don't have a lot of answers on the pension crisis. They don't have a lot of answers. I mean, they're talking about things that we consider to be kind of fairy dust, you know, LaSalle Street tax, commuter tax, you know, tax this, tax that. The city is in financial crisis, and I think that drives a lot of what we do on the editorial page, and that drove a lot of what we did with the endorsement. You at least have someone who has, you know, not endorsed a bunch of new TIF districts, who has tried to get, you know, different little pension reform with laborers and municipal workers, who has tried to curb non-discretionary or discretionary spending. So I think we were open to someone other than Rahm, but nobody was up to the job. At least they didn't perform well in the room with us.
All right. Well, he'll like that answer. He'll like that answer. Okay, Ed Mazer, this has almost been covered, but I'll just paraphrase it. Board member, Mr. Ed Mazer. The idea of a runoff, other than giving us 5 more weeks to write about it, what is basically and the extra cost it'll cost the city, do you think a runoff would do to expand the process or make the process better? Why a runoff?
It's really hard to predict how it would go because we've had that law in the books for 20 years and we've never had a runoff. Rich Daley always won, Rahm Emanuel won the last time. And the city council has long had this kind of a system, but it's really hard to use that as some sort of a template because if you wind up in a runoff in a city council race, it's kind of a crapshoot. The turnout falls almost in half in the runoff because there's no mayor's race. So I would expect a low turnout this time. So what happens if you do have a runoff? It becomes a national story. Rahm Emanuel just got repudiated by his city. People start to pay attention some more. But we also, let's assume it's Chuy Garcia. For the first time, anybody in the city is going to start paying attention to exactly what he's saying. I remember in our endorsement debate, Doc Walls, we invited Doc Walls. And he had more energy than anybody else running. So we gave him a chance to ask a question of each other, and you'd expect they'd all go after Mayor Emanuel, but he turned right to Chuy Garcia, and he said, Chuy, why don't you have any African Americans on your staff? Chuy didn't really have an answer for that. And I think when you look at how politics works in this city, if it's Chuy against Rahm, that becomes an issue. It's not an issue right now because most people haven't even figured out who Chuy is or what he's running for.
I like the idea.
Good, John.
I second that motion. I would like the idea of a runoff in the sense that, because I think we're in desperate need of it. We're in need of it as a city to have all that stuff shaken out. I tell you again, 20 years of quiet, dictatorial buffoonery that led us into garbage has to be shaken out. It's just my own personal view. I'm not speaking for the paper. There's all my editors there and my friends here, but my personal view is that you need a run out to shake this thing out. And I don't know why, is Rahm the brilliant Rahm because he has $30 million and all this power? I wonder how brilliant he'd look if he was scrambling for $50 donations. So we don't know, and I think a runoff would be just the right thing for the city and for all the neighborhoods to get people involved and do what my colleagues at the editorial board want, which is get some noise in there. Thank you.
Please, hold you.
All 3 of you.
Yeah, John. It's symbolic, John. That's really a big one over there. Yeah.
We're with you too, John. It's 5.
By the way,
Love you guys.
do we have anybody from Channel 2, 5, 7, 9, or not 11, or 12? Because you would really be happy with a runoff. Big time, right, Marty? Big time. Okay, 2 more questions. One from Jim. He's never going to win the pulling out of the card, Terman. This is a very good question. Unfortunately, not for this crowd, but I'll ask it anyways. I only have 2 left. I mean, this is kind of a reticent organization here all of a sudden. I think you're intimidated by these 3 hotshots up here. This is from Mr. Terman. What's your view on Brian Williams' situation? You got to read them. Okay, moving on.
That is a good question, Jim. To me, that was a reminder that you can build a career 20, 25, 30 years, and you can throw it away really fast when your credibility gets questions. It's a reason that we have very strict ethics codes, and we damn well better abide by them in our business, because we are spending all of our time pointing fingers at people. We better be sure that we've got the basic honesty and integrity to be able to handle that kind of a role. So I feel badly for him. I don't know him, but I feel like you saw a career going away in an instant.
It always helps to have editors and editors who challenge you. And I'm not just sucking up to them because they're here. It's true. It is true. And I think that was his problem. He didn't have people pressing him all the time. That's what you need. You know, because I remember the time in '83 when Bruce and I were at the city council by ourselves, and there was Chuy Garcia. you can see how you could, create a story and get in trouble, so, right? We'll just stay with the facts.
I saved you a lot.
Yeah, you did. All right, the story was we were on our way to a concert. We were trying to get the story done. We filed it really quickly and left. It was a deal.
No need, no, Father Ryan, your services may be needed after this, just in case. All right, normally we do not read anonymous questions. However, this happens to be a good one. And again, City Club rules are, it's at the discretion of the chairman to break them anytime he wants. So here we go. If Emmanuel, by the way, after I read it, if you want to volunteer after that buildup I gave you, say who in the hell you are, please do so. If the mayor wins all of you should answer this one. If the mayor wins in February, should the Chicago Teachers Union avoid a strike for a lack of political credibility?
Well, it's an editorial page is not crazy about the Chicago Teachers Union. I think they should always avoid a strike. I think it hurts kids. And I'm hearing from somebody who Bruce knows that there's not a lot of will this time around to go to the mat like they did last time. And so I would actually be surprised. I know their contract is up, but I don't really see this as this mayor's race as a race between CTU and ROM. I mean, obviously, if Karen Lewis were running, it'd be a different story. But I'm just not seeing it shape out that way. So I don't think there's really enough will for a teacher strike, especially given CPS's budget situation.
We haven't talked much about education, which is going to be a really critical issue it's always a critical issue, but it really is going to be over the next year. You do have the teacher's contract coming up. You've got a massive decision on what you're going to do about the pension system. You really could look to the fall and the schools can't open, not because of a teacher's strike, but because there isn't the money to open the schools, and they do have to deal with that. Now, I think I think we all know what a different race this would have been if Karen Lewis were in it. Jay, it was a thrill to sit with Karen at the City Club lunch 2 weeks ago and watch her, go after members of the audience, including a member of the school board. She would have been that would have been a fascinating race. But they're also probably looking at. Is she going, as she deals with her health, is she going to be able to run that union through the next contract negotiation? But I think there's going to have to be some kind of cooperation on this issue, because the contract that they finally settled after the strike is not going to look like the contract that they get next time. We talked to a lot of candidates too, a lot of push for an elected school board. I'd say, and I think our Tribune polling showed 75% for that. I have no doubt that in many of the referendums around the city, that's going to be a big winner. How would that work, though? And I think Chuy Garcia raised this, although he says he's a supporter of it. Do you do it by district? And if you do it by district, do you start gerrymandering? And who controls the gerrymandering?
That was raised here.
Do you do it citywide? And then, well, look at how a fifth of the city, the local school councils don't even function. Would folks come out and vote? Would it be representative of the city? Big blowback on charter schools, which Rahm Emanuel, I think, to his credit, has helped to support. But I could see a lot more difficulty for charters going forward. So, man, there are massive education issues that we've got to deal with.
Finances particularly, and we didn't mention curriculum, right? But finances, I don't know. There are financial people in the room. A while back, I mentioned that maybe bankruptcy might be one option for the Chicago public schools. I haven't heard anyone write or say no, this is not going to happen. I haven't heard mayor or his advisors say no, we're not going to do this. I'm just throwing it out there. Something we do sometimes. When you're a columnist, you throw stuff out there. Just think about it. That's all.
Okay. By the way, the moderator seldom involves himself in any of this, as you all know. Moderator. But these fellow and young lady Kristen, the pride and joy still of the South Suburbs, you never forget your roots, young lady. We remember.
I don't.
We remember you. We remember the biggest issue for the schools, for the city, is how they're going to find enough money to stay alive. $7.3 billion for the city, a $550 million pension payment that they don't have the money for. The public schools have a $600 million pension payment they don't have the money for. Where's the money going to come from? I mean, I just think that's the number one issue, and I'll be blunt, none of us have done a very good job telling the people that that's the number one issue. All the other issues are subsidiary, because you can't deal with education or public safety if you don't have the money. So, enough for me. How about a big round of applause for our people?